Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rage and Love, where we passionately explore and discuss religion, science, history, and current events. How are you doing today, Joe?
Hey, doing pretty good. Not too bad. How about you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Had a good day. Eventful.
Cold. It's cold outside in Texas. It's very cold right now for us.
Really freaking cold. Yeah, it's kind of pretty chilly in here. I got my hoodie on and everything, so to stay warm. But hopefully today's topic might turn up the heat a little bit because it's a topic that always makes people a little angry for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know why. So I have kind of a moral dilemma for everybody. Here's the thing: as atheists, we reject the idea that morality is, handed down from God or from the heavens, right? And instead, we build our ethics on things like reason, empathy, and scientific evidence. So if we believe that suffering matters, not because of the will of God, but because of the tangible reality of pain, shouldn't we extend that same moral consideration beyond just humans? If we recognize that morality is built on minimizing harm, then how do we justify the suffering that we inflict on other sentient beings for just, taste, habit, for pleasure, or just for convenience? So, without having that sort of shield of religious justification, like, do we as atheists have, uh, like an even greater responsibility to align how we act to the values that we hold? Or can we find a reasonable justification to kill animals for benefits? So tonight, we're going to challenge you to think outside the box. We're going to kind of maybe rock the boat a little bit,
I
confront
think more
some.
than a little bit. I think.
Yeah, I think so. We're gonna.
Hold on tight, guys. Put on your life
Yeah,
jacket.
yeah. Life jacket. That's a
Yeah,
good
your
one.
life
Great,
vest.
great idea. Yeah, I think people should do that because we're gonna be confronting some uncomfortable truths and ask if humans can thrive without exploiting animals, shouldn't we? And joining us to rock this boat together is another very well known YouTube atheist that you may know from Truth Wanted. Here's Objectively Dan, being very objective
Hello.
today.
Hello. How are you guys doing?
Welcome, Dan. Doing good.
You're doing
Great.
good.
Great. Ready to piss some
Awesome.
people off? Huh? You
Oh,
looking forward
yeah.
to it?
I mean, Truth Wanted is known for fighting back at people. Sometimes there's fighting words in there, right? Like,
It does happen. I try not to let it happen, but it does happen. Because here's the thing. I think I've become the kind of person now, especially after, let's say, recent political events, where if if there's something that's bullshit, you just got to call it for what it is, right? If there's something that's absolutely going to have a detrimental effect, if it's not called out, I've just decided I'm going to call it out, So I've been in a fighting mode for a little while now. I feel like, just in general.
Oh yeah, I would say for like the last year, even before these events started to unfold, very recently within the last 2 months or so. Like we were already putting our boxing gloves on,
Yeah,
getting ready.
Getting
Before
ready.
that,
Yeah.
fight or
I think
flight
everybody
mode
was.
for a lot
Yeah,
of us. Yeah, absolutely.
right. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. I think we were all on that fighting mode. So we are gonna keep that one in mind today. Somebody said, "Is danza."
That's
We're
right.
missing Zod, so it's just Danza today.
It's just Danza today. Aj Danja, Aj Dan Joe, something like that.
And
Joe Dan Adge. I don't know.
heck yeah, I like that
Some good
one.
wordplay. There we go.
Yeah.
We're on a t-shirt. So before we start this, okay, Dan, you are a vegan. Label yourself vegan, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Joe, you are here or in-house meat and potatoes guy.
Pretty
Yes,
much. Pretty much.
pretty much. And I am, I cannot call myself a vegan. I'm not currently a vegan. I eat mostly plant-based. I have been vegan in the past. I never really took the label even when I ate 100% plant-based, because I was like, I'm probably being a bad vegan. Like, I don't know, I'm eating honey, or like using a facial cream that's tested on animals. So like, I never like proudly call myself vegan, but it's something that I would like to get to at some point. But I mostly just enjoy discussing controversial topics. So here we are, right? that that's what we're here for. So then let's start with you. How long ago did you become a vegan?
I first started calling myself, I first considered the prospect probably around, it was around 2019 or so. And then I didn't really actually follow through with it until 2020. And there's a lot of reasons, a couple events in my life that led up to that. But one of them really was I went through a big breakup and was living by myself. And when you're by yourself and you're not a part of a larger, group environment, it becomes easier to make those kinds of decisions for yourself. But another thing that happened was I had adopted a cat that summer,
Oh,
and I took care of this cat. Never had a pet of my own, had family pets, but never one of my own. And I put a lot of effort into this cat, and I just couldn't get this thought out of my mind, which was, why am I doing so much for this one cat? But why don't I care about the other animals that I'm eating every day? It didn't make sense. What substantially is the difference between this cat and a cow? Is a cow less intelligent than a cat? Not really, right? Does it feel less? I don't think that's true, right? And the more I started to deconstruct this idea, the more I started looking into it. And then it got to the point where I was buying books and reading stuff. And then I realized, I have a problem, because like my atheism thing, which is a problem when you're a Christian, right? Because you
right.
kind of have to leave a lot of things behind if you want to be honest with yourself and go through that process. I had to leave a lot of what I was doing behind, my lifestyle behind, because suddenly it wasn't working. So I started to eschew animal products, and it was about 6 months of me doing it before I actually came up publicly as vegan. Because one, I wanted to do some research, and also to make sure I was actually sticking with this. And that
Yeah.
doesn't mean I was perfect. I'm still not perfect. I still given to temptations. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I don't try to live a vegan lifestyle. And I can talk more about specifically what I mean when I use the definition for vegan. But yeah, that's the long and short of it there, of how I kind of got into this.
I like that because, as I said earlier, like even when I was eating 100% plant-based, like I was not eating meat, I was not eating eggs, no cheese. I think I even gave up honey. But I was still thinking, like, I was still aiming for like that perfection, that perfect vegan sort of like, I can't call myself vegan if I'm, accidentally doing this or that, or if I'm not thinking about, the harm that I'm causing whatever animals they're using to test this lotion or stuff. Like, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I like that you're making that point that, you're still, even though it's been like what we said 5 years or so, that you still don't consider
Yeah,
yourself
20
perfect.
2020. And so the definition I pulled from is from the Vegan Society. And it's kind of a long definition, but I have it pulled up here because I always forget the exact wording
Sure.
every time. I'm gonna read it to you real quick. It's just this one sentence, right? But it's a long sentence. It's veganism is a philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose, and by extension, promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives for the benefit of animals, humans, and the environment. I promise you, that's one sentence, really long sentence, right? But this is this idea, right? We know that lying generally is a bad thing, right? But there are cases where we might justify lying, and even though we know that lying is a bad thing, chances are, AJ, by this time next year, you're probably going to have told at least some lies,
Quite a few.
right? Right? It just
Yeah.
happens. It's part of life. And sometimes they're inconsequential. Hopefully they're inconsequential, right? But we still have this kind of contradiction. But even though we have this contradiction, that doesn't mean that
Right.
we can't recognize the general principle that, yeah, lying in general is still bad, right? So even though
Yeah.
there may be practical or otherwise unwanted uses of animal products, that doesn't mean that it doesn't hold true that we should still strive to eliminate our use of animal products as much as possible, right? So you don't have to live in a hut in the middle of Zimbabwe to call yourself vegan to get away from things. I think it is a mindset and a look towards opportunities in which you can eschew yourself from using animal products in your daily life, right? So that's really my perspective on it.
Yeah, that is actually,
That's
like,
a good view. It's a good definition. Go
yeah,
ahead,
I
AJ. Sorry.
agree. I agree. No, no, you're good. You're good. I lost my train of thought there. But let me, speaking of like the definition of veganism, when you tell somebody that you're vegan, there seem to be like so many negative opinions of people, like they think that, vegans are preachy or pushy or self-righteous, or that they, holier than thou or whatever, right? Like, did before becoming vegan, did you share those opinions of
Oh,
vegans?
100%.
You did.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, I grew up in Texas, AJ. Of course I did, right?
That's
Vegans
true.
are like atheists in an alternative subculture, right? And when you're part of an alternative subculture, you're going to get ridiculed. This happens to anarchists, this happens to free love people, this happens to anybody that's not a part of the mainstream culture. And so you get your licks in, right? And obviously there are vegans that I don't particularly care for, right? In the same way that there are atheists that I really don't care for at all. Does that mean that the values or the truths of whatever they talk about aren't true? No, right? But there's always going to be people that are pointed at, laughed at, and groups of people that are pointed at, laughed at, not to be taken seriously. Doesn't actually take away from the merit of what they're saying. And I think veganism in particular is a really misunderstood phenomenon because it can be interpreted in spiritualist ways, it can be interpreted in health science quackery kind of ways. There's a lot
Yeah.
of misinformation that surrounds veganism and its proposed benefits that doesn't help with the conversation of why people should go vegan, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, there's so much that we need to discuss regarding veganism, because I feel like it's sort of like a very stigmatized label, like atheist, like you said. Being
Yeah.
atheist, being vegan is kind of like a very similar thing. Like you say it, and like, people expect you to like burn into flames or something, right?
Yeah. So,
So I,
the term vegophobia has been used, and you might hear that and you think, "Oh, how silly." They have their own word for this. Well, think about this. If you are part of the LGBT community and you express that you have a preference for same-sex attraction, and somebody says, "Oh, well, I just like women." Right? That's just my thing or whatever. It's, that kind of language, like that kind of response is sort of seen as a faux pas these days, right? Because it's like, well, it's not being super respectful of other people. Like you're kind of seeing LGBTQ people as sort of an outlier, sort of a
Mhm.
not part of a normal spectrum of human sexuality, which is how it should be. There's kind of, even these kinds of soft teasing can be perceived as being homophobic, right? Because
Yeah.
rightfully so. These kinds of microaggressions that kind of show that you don't fully accept someone for who they are, right? How many times, AJ, and you've seen this, have I mentioned to somebody in our community that I'm vegan and their response is, well, I just like bacon or I just,
Man,
right?
I would,
So,
I'm so glad that the chat today is filled with vegans. I shared the link on a bunch of vegan places, because every time I see the conversations, like the one you had with Dr. Ben, the
mhm,
chat was wild, man. It was
yeah.
horrible. It was brutal.
But just to point out, these, so-called progressive folks that we like to think of ourselves and surround ourselves with it. So for some reason, the vegans, they're not invited to that party, right? They're not on that list. And I'd like to change that as much as I can. Obviously, I'm one person, right? But my hope with at least talking about it and being more open about it online is that I can at least show people a perspective that they may not have considered before, because maybe they haven't really looked into it as much as they thought, or haven't had it put to them in a way that made sense. So that's what made it something that I was interested in, actually not only just exploring for my personal life, but also as part of my overall activism online. Because I do think that veganism is part and parcel with the rest of my moral philosophy and how I understand and do everything else that I do in an activist sense.
Yeah, no, I completely agree because I started my, plant-based journey just for health reasons. Like a lot of people do. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
why I mostly just call myself plant-based because it was just for the health. But the more I talk to, like, I think I talked to Chase before I talked to you about veganism. So, but both of you have talked to me about it on the after shows and, on the phone calls and all of that. And the more I talk to people like that, it's like, okay, the more it makes sense to me that the values that I already hold after
Mm-hmm.
having become deconstructed from religion are very similar to those of vegans, right? Like you don't want to do harm to animals. You believe that we are all animals, that we all are sentient creatures, that we all have, I don't know, that we all feel pain, that we all feel emotions, even if not on the exact same level. We all still do, right? Like I have this dog that's like so jealous. Like I will call another one of my dog's name, and she will immediately come and start rubbing on me, like, "Hey, give me attention! Like, why are you not calling me?" It's
Mm.
like you can tell that animals feel. Like, I mean,
Yeah, I think you're touching on something that's really subtle, and that I like to try to explain to people as best as I can, which is this idea that, look, my sense of morals, my sense of moral thinking, isn't actually as different from anybody else that I normally talk to on a day-to-day basis. It really isn't. All I've really done is I've tried to make it more consistent. That's really all it is. Because the truth is, most people are already vegan in some way, shape, or form. I'll give you an example of this. Okay. And I brought this up before. Back in the day, right? They used to, and still do, by the way, but even more so, gruesomely test animals in ways that we have actually outlawed in some ways, right? We still have a terrible, quite frankly, laws around how we do animal testing. But the fact that we even have the laws that we do today is a reflection of a society that actually does care about animals and animal suffering in some way. I bring up the example of Rene Descartes. Descartes, obviously, probably this audience is familiar, big philosopher, but he was, in his day, was a natural philosopher, which means was kind of a way to say scientist, right? He would actually take a dog and put it up while it was still alive on a pin board, and put these pins and these nails really through the bodies of the dogs so that they could do these live vivisections. And that's how they taught biology. Now, there are some people today that say we need these animal testings to understand more things about the world. And to me, it's kind of like saying, it's like Rene Descartes saying, well, we need these live vivisections of these dogs in order to better understand biology. We have lots of models today where we don't actually do that sort of thing, right? We've developed
yeah,
better and better ways to understand animals and biology itself without having these unnecessary harms. And we can continue to do that. We can continue to develop that if more people are sort of on board with this idea. The truth is, we have changed, and society in some fashion, in some ways, is more vegan than it used to be, but
yeah,
not in other ways very significantly, of course, with factory farming,
Yeah.
right? And these other very gruesome things that most people don't like to think about and don't talk about, because a lot of us understand that it's kind of this skeleton our collective closet. I don't know. I'm rambling a bit here, but I think you get my point. Is
Yeah.
what I'm
Well, and I
trying
can see that. I mean, we're so industrialized
to.
with the way we produce meat. If I had to, me as a person who's not vegan, but I have been vegan in the past, where I think I made it 6 months at one
Yeah.
point without eating any meat. Um, and I did notice, it was I was healthier. I felt better. But the way our society is, I grew up, eating meat and being told and taught that, eat your meat, you
Yeah.
eat meat to grow strong and, to be healthy, when in fact it's kind of just the opposite. And then we have so much fast food and just the ease and accessibility to foods quickly that are not healthy for you. And I think that temptation there, the ease to be able to go buy a burger, versus if I actually had to go out and hunt and kill and then process the meat myself, I wouldn't eat meat. I would be eating vegetables for sure. I mean, that's just my experience and my view on it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. A couple different things there. I mean, we are often told myths about certain foods and stuff, and food science by itself, by the way, if there's any science that's more full of absolute crockery than food science, I mean, you let me know, right? It's full of the most biased research, maybe more so than any other field. I could be wrong about that, but from what I've seen, right, there's very little consensus on a lot of things than what's often portrayed, right? But the point is, there are some consensus, including the World Health Organization, which has said that meat is carcinogenic,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
how, to deny that at this point, I think is faulty, right? And we understand that, like, yeah, there are also potential deficits to a vegan diet that must be addressed and should be addressed in a healthy way. One of them, of course, famously is B12. B12 supplements are a great way to get that. There's also B12 fortified foods. But what a lot of people don't know is that about a third of United States citizens already are deficient in B12. And a third of the United States is not vegan. Okay. So that's
And
something that a lot of
Interesting.
people need to get in on anyway, you know?
yeah, I will add that the vitamin B12 that people get from meat is actually added to the meat.
That's
So
right.
they're pretty much
It's
taking a supplement too.
So
The
they
well,
vitamin
inject it into
the
the meat.
the animals themselves, their food is supplemented with B12,
Like high
right?
levels of it then. Okay.
So that's where we get the B12, because the B12 is coming in and getting consumed by the animals. So it's this cycle of, okay, well, it's already being supplemented anyway. You're just cutting out the middleman,
right.
right? Um,
Exactly.
so anyway, so yeah, like a long story short, in my response to you there, Joseph, yeah, there is a health aspect as well. It's very tricky when you're talking about that. And I will never say that a vegan diet is superior to every and all metrics. That's just not the case. But no, there's no diet that is, right?
True.
And the truth is, most people are not that consistent about their diets anyway. So I find it very funny when people talk to me about these kinds of things, but it's like, dude, like, yeah, I know you, I know the way you eat. You're not caring about it as much as I
Yeah.
am,
Yeah.
right? So it's funny when people bring those kinds of points to me. But
But
yeah,
it's a very hard mental chain to break, though, like, when I think about eating vegetables, like, it's just not enticing to me, and it makes me, it's like my brain doesn't tells me, don't consume that. So it's just weird. I mean, it's a very, very hard thing to defeat. So, like, anyone who
yeah.
is vegan, I give them very high props for that, because you're able to basically defeat that thought in their head.
Well, let me introduce you to vegan junk food, okay? Because there's plenty of it,
What
right?
pizza?
Um, you know, and I don't really. I mean, it's more so other kinds of proteins that gets replaced more than anything. Not even just the vegetables, right? We're talking beans, we're talking tofu, we're talking, alternative sources rather than just, oh, I'm eating like sticks of celery every day, right?
Got you. Yeah.
Um, People have to figure out what works best for them. But I will say I've found more options than ever for myself that I did not realize were there before. And I think that is a barrier for a lot of people because they don't even realize everything that's out there.
Oh yeah, I mean, like the vegan market has grown immensely, like
Mhm.
especially over like, I don't know, 10 years. Like it's kind of like the gluten-free market. It's like
Right.
sort of
Has
like
its own
And
section now.
that
Yeah.
that grows, AJ, because people buy products, right? Because
yeah,
there is a demand. And this is so funny when people tell me, "Oh, there's no ethical consumption under capitalism." Okay, all right. Maybe I can agree with you somewhat there, but you know what there is under capitalism? Market trends. Okay? If more and more people buy vegan food, then more and more vegan products will be made. And veganism becomes more and more accessible to everybody, right? So, in a real way, even more so than other kinds of activism, vegan activism actually makes more of a difference because you are actively funding the industries that you want to support every time you're making purchase to alternative products.
right, right, that's true. So speaking of food, what was the best food that you discovered after going vegan? Something that you hadn't tried before. Can you think of
Um,
anything? Junk, vegan, don't matter.
well, I was taught, that tofu was kind of this gross, kind of disgusting square cube that it just kind of tastes funny. And I kind of had this moment that I realized I don't know if I've ever actually had tofu in my life before I became vegan. Turns out you can do a lot with tofu as a base protein. And like, could I tell you the best thing? I've had a lot of things since I've started. And by the way, again, want to remind people that I'm not 100%, never been 100% consistent on since 2020. I've had lapses in that, but that ethic inside me still stays in what I think is right. And so yeah, I couldn't tell you one thing, but there's a lot of recipes out there. I think also switching from um purchasing, eating out a lot of my meals versus cooking from home also makes a big
Yeah,
difference because that's just going to be good for you in general, right? Better portion control and stuff, right? So I think that also kind of needed to happen for me at least.
yeah, but I can safely say that finding both gluten-free and vegan all at once at restaurants is like very, very rare. Yeah, but tofu, I love tofu.
Yeah.
Like I have a funny story. When I started talking to my parents about veganism, they were like, "All right, like we'll try it out a little bit. We'll swap some of our proteins for other stuff." And so my mom went and got tofu. They live in Switzerland, so I wasn't there to like help them out with it, right? And the next day, she's like, "We tried the tofu, and I'm never trying it again." I was like, "Why? What happened? What did you do?" She was like, "We just put it on a salad, like uncooked, unseasoned,
Oh, well,
Just,
yeah.
straight from
just
the
there
There
you
you
go.
go.
carton." I was like, "Mom, what did you do?" Yeah, that's why you don't like it. Like you gotta,
Yeah.
I don't know, season it, and I love it air fried. Air fried. I don't know if you have an air fryer or oven. It's like,
She cooks all kinds of cool
oh
stuff with
yeah,
tofu. I did like the tofu chicken you made before. Well, I call it, she tells me, tricks me by saying tofu chicken, but I mean, it tasted like chicken with the
yeah. I
crust.
mean, it kind of looks like chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
I coated it with like what was it? Nutritional yeast.
Yeah.
So yeah, it came out
Yeah.
really good.
So there's definitely
Yeah,
a lot of things
absolutely.
you can do for sure. Yeah.
One of my weaknesses has always been fried chicken. So I found that there's certain mushrooms that you can deep fry them like the same way that you will bread it with like
Right.
some type of coating and like flour stuff, and it's like
Yeah, so
game
veganism
changer.
is often described as a limiting diet. I mean, and by definition, yes, of course, right? Yeah, you are eliminating categories of food that you would normally consume. But the reality is, I am also buying and purchasing and trying foods that I otherwise would not have done on my own. As adventurous as it was, I'm a fairly adventurous food guy. I don't really shy away too much. There's just a lot of plant-based products that just didn't interest me before, or to be honest, didn't even notice existed. Now, you know, there's more prevalence for plant-based food now in 2025 than you know, any other point I've been alive. So I think other people are starting to see that too. But I try to think of it positively in the sense of look at all these things that I've tried now and other people haven't tried. So who's the limited one now? Right? I mean, at least at least try some of this stuff, you know, if you're gonna knock it, right? But anyway.
Yeah, like if you don't like it, you know, you don't have to eat it again, but at least you gave it a try, right? So
I'm usually
yeah.
pretty open about trying some of the plant-based stuff. I do like some of that meat that they have. It's not
Oh,
the
the
Impossible
ground.
meat, but
Yeah.
there's a brand from a local store here called HEB. I know we're in Texas. You know HEB, Dan, but other people might not. And they have their own brand of some plant-based, meats, and they're good. So
Yeah.
definitely,
And
I could
again,
see where you
that's
can change.
because there's now a market for that now. That
Yeah.
wasn't a thing before. And like, you know, people talk about activism and what matters and what doesn't. Let me tell you, vegans buying stuff is one of the best forms of activism. Really, it really is, because you're buying food every day, right? Or at least you're buying food for every day, right? If you're making a purchase for like your next week or whatever. So like that is really making a difference, almost even more so than the stuff I do online for atheism, because the only thing that's going to be consumed by is people who are watching the videos, whereas my money is going towards stuff that I want supported every day, as long as I keep up with it, right?
But that's exactly the same thing that happens on the other side. The reason we have all these huge animal farming setups is because of, supply and demand.
Yeah,
People want to buy
demand.
it, people buying it. So
Yes.
um, we are producing like way more than anyone could ever eat. I'm sure like the meat waste is enormous out there. So, I mean, like, we don't even have to talk about the harms of what those practices are doing, okay? Um, to make the moral argument for veganism, because I think we've all pretty much heard about the harms of animal farming. But I think that one of the things that I've talked to you about, um, that is something that a lot of vegans may not actually even think about, and that non-vegans obviously probably haven't thought about, is the biology of both humans and animals. All right, like I think, well, hope that understanding the biology, the similarities and differences as well between animals and humans could help people make the connection that we are all pretty similar. So a while back, I called one of the shows that you were on, Talk Heathen, right? And Jimmy Jr. was on it, who also turned vegan thanks to one of our listeners today, Chase. And Forrest Falkai was on the show. So I mostly called because I wanted to like hear some fighting words between you and Forrest, um, because I had heard Forrest talking about veganism before, and he's kind of like, well, no, we don't need to go vegan. Like like farming is bad, but we don't need to like completely eradicate farming. So, anyways, I was after the call, I was a little taken aback by his reply to my questions, and I wish that I had been able to give a better response. Like how it is when you're on a live show. It's like you're on the spot, and things might take a little bit to process, right? So he asserted that humans have evolved to adapt to eating meat, and that we get a significant benefit biologically from eating meat, including the claim that humans have gotten taller or that we have gotten stronger because of eating meat. And well, I am not a biologist, okay, so I didn't want to disrespect him and or his education either, but I disagree with that assessment from the very little that I know and that I especially have learned from him, right? Like we always tell people to listen to the experts, so I kind of like wanted to listen to him. But I have done a fair share of listening to other experts as well, right? Like who uh, are experts in plant-based diet, or I don't know, heart disease and how to reverse it with these plant-based diets. So I feel like I have learned that there are so many other factors that have helped people increase their body size or strength, like things like more access to processed food, better healthcare, better food access in general. Like we all have like the market right around the corner, most of us, anyways. More fitness options, nutritional programs, medications, hormones, all of these kind of things. So the fact that you can compare a vegan versus a carnivore or omnivore, I should say, bodybuilder, and you can see no different in their ability to build muscle, just as strong and capable. Like that shows us that our bodies can easily adjust to a plant-based diet, and that we are not necessarily evolved to eating meat. Like, what do you think about that specific claim that we have
Yeah.
adapted or evolved to eating meat?
Well, so Forrest was talking about a very popular, and I would say what I'm going to say hotly debated. It is debated. It is not complete consensus, but it is a very reputable understanding of human biology, which is a fact within the discipline of anthropology, which tells us that at some point in our evolutionary lineage, the ability to cook meats, those proteins that come from cooked meats, enhanced our brain development. Okay, and I learned this when I was in college when I took bioanthro, right? So Forrest is citing real science there, and I my contesting was not with that, because very serious and more knowledgeable people have proposed that as a theory of human development, but it is not completely accepted within the field of anthropology. Like many things in anthropology, there are a lot of unknowns. So I will give that maybe at some point in our development, meats were essential to human evolution. Great. I will fully accept that. That does not have anything to do with my understanding of me living as a person today, because I'm not worried about my future evolutionary development, right?
Right,
I'm
right.
already here. What can I do in the present, in the now, right? Well, because
That's
like
a good point.
what are we saying when we say these people? Okay, so some apes ate some cooked meats and now we're here today. Okay, so what? We don't have to do that. Some apes also enslaved other people and did terrible things to other people and committed absolute atrocities to other people. So what? It doesn't matter what happens in the past in this case. It doesn't inform how I live my life today, really, in any way, unless I'm actually like creating a deficit within myself and my brain development today by eating plant-based. That could be something, right? As far as I'm aware, there is absolutely no evidence that suggests that. Otherwise, there's people that have been vegan longer than I have, who seem just
Right.
fine to me. So, my hair is still pretty good. That's the thing people say. People go bald. I have better hair than a lot of people, I would say, my age at least. So I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't really matter much to me, honestly.
Yeah, the problem I do find with putting that out there is that a lot of people do care about that. You know, they're like, well, I don't want to go vegan because humans have to eat meat. So to me, like talking about it is an
Yes.
important part of the activism to help people understand that that is definitely not the case. Like I said, I listened to Forrest talk a lot about evolution, and one of the things that he always explained is that evolution doesn't happen in individuals. That these major adaptations that humans have happen through natural selection across entire population of the same species over millions of years. Right? I'm pretty sure that's I can
Yes.
quote him on that really closely. Um, so, anyways, like there may be some types of adaptations that could happen, let's say over hundreds of thousands of years, right? That is possible. But in the sense of eating meat as an adaptation, I would say that that's pretty unlikely to have happened in the time that humans have, that our kinds of human, right? Modern humans have been around, like Homo
Yeah.
sapiens have been around 300,000 years.
Yeah. Well, AJ, let's take a look again at this definition that I provided earlier, right? Veganism is a philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. So, you know, if we're talking about humans 200,000 years ago, of course it was practical for them to eat meat. I'm not debating, this is a thing that people say too. Oh, veganism is a privileged position. What about these indigenous societies that
Yeah,
rely on local animal ecosystems? And I say, cool, right?
that's what they had. Yeah,
That's their thing. I don't need that. I
yeah,
buy all of my food from the store. Okay. I'm not out there hunting mammoths or, relying on that kind of ecosystem for my own development. So like those things don't really matter to me. Like in some point in the far flung future, sure, we'll get to that. That's not my issue. We got to talk about these big industry farms that are decimating lives every single day, right?
oh yeah,
Every single day. So that's really my concern. I again, it's like, yeah, it's the practical parts of it. Some people think they live in food deserts when they don't, or make these kinds of excuses that say, oh well, it's necessary. And maybe there's a hidden assumption there in what Forrest is saying, that it's necessary for humans to eat meat, but I don't think that's his position. I think he sees myself and other vegans that see that we live our lives just fine. I do think that there are folks who just are so hesitant to really have that radical shift in changing their perspective that you kind of have to give what you got. And maybe that turns up in the form of an argument of, well, humans 200,000 years ago ate meat, right? And maybe that's, what's happening there. But that's me speculating, right? I don't know Forrest's heart. I don't know how he truly feels about it, but you know.
that's true. That's very true. Yeah, and on that topic that you were just talking about, like, why do you think people have such a hard time, like such an opposition, I guess you could say, to not eating meat?
Because change is hard and we
It is
want to
hard.
pretend like it's not our problem, right? It's somebody else's problem. There are cases in which something may not be my problem. For example, the United States dealings with foreign nations on NATO. Okay. What can I really do about that? Maybe I can help organizing contact senators and stuff. Maybe I'm not really part of that political apparatus. That is so far removed from my current situation. I can't really do much. The fact is, I eat food every day and I purchase food at least once a week for grocery shopping, if not more, if I'm ordering out or whatever, right? And those decisions add up. And I don't have to make those decisions. I can choose to make other decisions, ones that benefit a more plant-based world. So there is a responsibility there, whether we like to acknowledge that or not. I think most of us would rather just kind of put it in the corner and ignore it,
Yeah,
rather than
no,
deal with it.
that's what I agree with you on that, Dan, 100%. That's what I do. Like I know in my mind morally, I don't feel that it's right. Like I love animals, but I just kind of like put that in the part of my mind where I don't think about it when I'm eating meat,
Yeah.
to
I mean,
overlook it.
if you saw a dog that was crossing the street and it was almost being hit by a car, I imagine, Joseph, you would try to stop that.
Oh,
You would,
definitely. Yeah.
right? But for some reason, when it comes to animals that are we deem as meant for food, we don't seem to have that instinct. And I think that's the real issue here. I think there's some cultural parts to this as well, right? Obviously, we culturally value dogs and cats differently than we do pigs and cows.
Yeah.
They talk about Melanie Joy talks about this in her book, Why We Wear Cows, Love Dogs, and Eat Pigs. I think that's the title. I always get the animals confused in the order there. Talks about the psychology of carnism, which is this culture of, hey, here's food animals and here's fun
None.
family, yeah, animals that we care about. And then there's like wildlife that's just kind of there, right? We kind of have these categories that are really culturally derived. That's why in India, famously, right, cows are venerated in many circles there. We don't have that same adoration culturally. We don't have the same attitudes. You can't farm stuff, and you can't raise cows like you do in America in India. People who buy cow meat in India tend to get it from Pakistan because they don't have the same regulations there, and that's a reflection of culture. So yeah, I think cultural attitudes play a huge part, and also just a shirking of responsibility that is inevitable when we live in a society that's so atomized and so specialized and structured that we don't even have to think about where our food comes from. We just get it from the store and we go home and that's it, right?
But like you just said, we have this hierarchy of like humans at the top. Then you have, I don't know, cats and dogs, and then you have like edible animals. Well, I think you categorize them in three, right? Like domesticated animals and then everything else, right? But I think there is an extra added layer there because most people see humans, cats and dogs, edible animals are like a completely different category than
Yes.
wild animals. Like, where do you think that cognitive dissonance comes from? Because you'll see people say, "Oh, I'm an animal lover," and they will go and volunteer and like
Right.
clean up birds in an oil spill and like wipe all the oil off, and then drive home and stop at McDonald's and eat a chicken sandwich. And
Yep.
it's like you just
Yep.
cleaned up a bird and you're eating a bird. What is up with that? What do you
Yep.
think? Like, where does that
Yeah, that's
separation?
carnism. That's carnism in action. It's the idea that there are socially acceptable, these are food animals, and then there's cute dog, pet animals, right? And that has really done a number for how we holistically relate to the rest of the world and to nature, right? Because if we saw pigs and cows in the wild like they were supposed to be, right, in the same way that we do with other animals like a squirrel or something, right, we would probably have similar attitudes that we would to a squirrel or to a badger or to a raccoon, where these are animals that are supposed to be out there in the wild and we do our thing with them, but we don't really mess with them, right? But because we've domesticated certain animals and because it's profitable to do so at this point, we continue to accept them as animals that are okay to just eat, even though really, like, on a cognitive level, but also on a biological level, that really doesn't make a lot of sense. Atheists like to talk about Charles Darwin. One of the greatest things Charles Darwin did was tell us how similar we actually are to other animals, right? And the nervous system, the system of nociception, our ability to feel pain, guess what? That's almost universal across mammals, right? The dog's ability to feel pain is not really that much different to feel from a human's point. Do they have psychological and distress? Gets a little bit more complicated. But in terms of the raw nervous system, same. Works the same, right? So
It seems that we're kind of, as a society, though, that we're desensitized to like that certain group of animals that we eat to even think about them. That like when I try to think of a cow, like I don't have that connection in my mind to think to feel sad for them because I've been taught that it's okay to eat them my whole life, and I've had that kind of mindset. But I have opened up to see where I do see where I'm contradicting on picking and choosing, basically what y'all just both described. So it definitely is a battle that and something that you have to, I guess I could use the word deconstruct yourself from, because you're as an American in our society, I've been raised on that belief that it's okay to eat these animals.
right.
And
So
it could almost even be a masculinity thing as well. I don't know if you could tie that
Definitely
to it,
plays a
where you
part.
say, you're a man if you eat a
hunter,
steak,
yeah.
eat a steak, and you're gonna grow hair on your chest, or this and
Yeah.
that. As a society, we have to get away and break the change from those type of labels.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
And
Chase made a
just if
good.
you met me in real life, I'm a 6'5", uh,
Oh,
big
you're
white
tall,
guy.
man. Yeah.
The masculinity shit never made fucking sense to me. Okay, absolute bullshit. All right, I could go on about that, but yeah, that's definitely an element too. You talk about feeling sad for him. Peter Singer talks about his reasoning in the book Animal Liberation, and he makes a comment that I kind of agree with, which is this idea that, like, he's saying, I don't particularly care about animals, like, on an emotional level, right? Like, it really, the whole reasoning here isn't about that. It's not about sympathy. It's more just, again, being consistent in your understanding of how you treat others, right? I don't have to necessarily care about the individual lives of the neighbors around me, for example, to understand that, hey, playing my music really loud for them to hear is just kind of a rude thing to do, right? Because they're humans like me, and they would get annoyed by it just like how I would get annoyed by it. So, you don't have to be particularly interested or even feel sorry for them to just even make this understanding and logic happen. But I think you were going to say something, AJ.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that Chase made a good point in the chat. He said we were indoctrinated to discriminate against animals, and I think that's a really good point, because to me, it's kind of like the religious belief, like placing ourselves in a position above all of animals, because
Mhm.
humans were created special, like
Yeah.
we were putting ourselves in a position where we can choose to end a life that didn't need to end, just for pleasure, right? Like, it's kind of like I just said, like, it's like the theist argument that humans are superior to all other creatures because they were created by gods first,
Right.
as the very first creatures, and he made us special, and he gave us a soul and a purpose. And as atheists, I think that we should not be holding that type of position. So I'm going to ask you then a question, but I hope that the people in the chat are also considering this. Like, is there anything biologically that puts humans above non-human animals?
Well, that's such an open-ended question that's really hard to answer.
I guess so.
I mean, like, there's a lot of things that humans can do that animals can't do. I'm pretty sure animals can't operate ChatGPT very well, for example. I mean, what are we talking about better
But
here?
does that make us better simply because we can operate Chat GPT?
Well, so does better mean more worthy of moral consideration in this case? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, that's a better way to word that question. Yeah, like, should
So going back to Peter Singer, quite controversially made this argument once. And he basically said, look, like, morally speaking, between a fully grown adult gorilla and an infant human, these are really the same. You should really consider these the same. Obviously, you got some heat for a take like that, right? And I think it's being kind of misunderstood. I think if Peter Singer was put in a situation between saving a gorilla and a human infant, he would save the human infant, right? Because he's also a human, and we have a bias towards other humans. But what Peter Singer was making in that, trying to make clear in that moment, was that when it comes to an animal's capacity for sentience, and in this case, really a capacity for suffering, right? They are on par, if not more so. An adult gorilla, has a higher capacity for suffering than, say, a 3-month-old human baby does, right? It actually experiences more complex emotions and a sense of perception than the human baby does, which, if you really think about that, is just true on a biological sense, right? That's really uncomfortable for people to hear, because we want to think we're the best, we mean the most. And again, if I'm put between those two situations, I'm going to save a human, right? But if we're talking about things in a universal sense, do we actually need to have a supremacist value system against other animals that we could consider sapient or sentient, whatever word you like to use, on some level? It doesn't seem to make sense, right? So that may require a dismantling of some of the current systems that we have to uphold these hierarchies that make it unfair for these animals to, freely live the lives that they could live. How radical you choose to understand and interpret that, there's a reason why there are some vegan groups that do some pretty wild and radical things. But it has to be said that there has to be at least some consideration if you understand human beings as a byproduct of evolution, just like every other organism on this earth. In that sense, we're not that much special, right?
Right, and I think that all species are, sort of wired to make sure that their species survived and doesn't,
Sure.
go extinct. So in that sense, yeah, we can say, okay, if there's a life of an animal and my life, then, or I don't know, another human life, then I'm going to save the other human life simply because of that sort of innate instinct to save our own species. So that's a good point. But speaking of radical actions, do you think that um, the goal of reduced harm to humans or and animals is enough? Like, how can I word this better? Do we need to aim for complete veganism, or is reduced harm good enough?
Well, harm reduction is a very controversial topic in general, even just outside of veganism, right? Even when we talk about political action, what harm reduction really means, how that can sometimes get us into trouble. There is a time and place for radical action, I believe, personally, my opinion. And I'm going to keep it as vague as that for as long as YouTube can allow me. But no, but really, what it is um, if you come to the conclusion that, okay, humans, gorillas, pigs, all these other animals may be worthy of moral consideration, it does require some dismantling in order to seek justice, right? So, one way to think about this is with the institution of slavery, particularly slavery within the United States, right? Let's say we are living in these times, a pre-bellum world, right? Where there are active slave owners in the South. What would
Yeah.
you or I do in that situation? Some people, what we retroactively, righteously so say that we should go free those people and provide an underground railroad to get these people out of there. And people did that. And we look upon that today as something noble, but that was not seen as the case at the time. These were illegal,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
These people were villainized for breaking the law and disrupting the social order, but they were doing something that would we retroactively see as just. And maybe it's just a matter of not being in the right times to view what we should be doing in our own actions today, right? There's certainly lots of vegan groups that try to film documentaries on farms and stuff. Quite famously, there are a lot of what's called ag-gag laws, right? Laws that specifically prohibit filming in agriculture facilities and stuff, right? And these documentaries get out. There's people that, do these kinds of protests and stuff. I can't tell you what to do there, right? Probably without breaking YouTube's terms of service, at least. But what I can say is there are some radical implications of what could be done if you fully consider the ramifications of accepting this kind of worldview. Yeah. Is that
Yeah,
good
I
enough,
mean,
AJ? Is that good enough? I don't know.
oh yeah, you got me there, definitely. Now I was thinking of something when you say slavery. I was thinking of a video that I was watching earlier, and they were talking about something similar, like zoos, and they were kind of comparing them to a modern slavery, but of animals, like the way that we just put them in display and like keep them in cages and just for people's sort of entertainment. And there was somebody trying to defend it and say like, oh hey, they do a lot of research and they keep the animals what's the make sure that they reproduce with their same species of animals on other zoos to keep them going. But it was like, I don't know, like monkeys and lions and tigers and elephants, they may be in certain areas threatened, but they're not to the point where we need to keep them in isolation in order to keep their species alive. So that's where my mind went when we were just talking about slavery right now.
I do
Yeah, I
have
mean,
a weird
oh, go
topic.
ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, Dan. Because
No, please go ahead.
mine's gonna throw us for a loop probably if I say what I'm thinking.
Well, I just think of Slaughterhouse-5,
Go for it.
right? So Slaughterhouse-5 is a very what's the word? Kind of goes all over the place, right, in its story. But at one point, there's the main character of the story is on a planet where they are part of basically a human zoo. And the justification for this is they get another human celebrity for him to like have sex with when he wants, and they feed him and they just, you know, take care of him and stuff. And it's like, so yeah, he's living his life, right? Like we're helping him. There's no more humans left for where he's at. So we're doing this human being a favor here, really, by keeping him in this pen. And so, you know, I think what this is alluding to is to what we do with zoos today. The sort of research and the other benefits that come, these are sort of post rationalizations of what we've done with zoos, because zoos have been so terrible before that we've now had to justify their existence by adding on these additional features. You know who else does research and contributes to biological fun? SeaWorld, right? And we all know what
Oh,
happens, right? And I think we've seen Blackfish, right? Everyone's seen Blackfish.
yeah.
Not great things, but we kind of say, oh, but look, they do these other good things, so they justify in keeping themselves as an institution. In my perspective as a vegan, right? A dismantling of these institutions is the only just thing you can do. You can't have some slavery if it's for good, right? We can't say, oh, this slavery is great. No, it's helpful for the economy if we keep this slavery going, right? We don't think like that. But for some reason, when it comes to animals, we're able to kind of have these sort of justifications, even though they may not really make sense.
Yeah, another area where I see that sort of justification of the harm for fully entertainment purposes is fishing. Okay, so not to piss anybody off here, because I know some family members of ours that love fishing, but when I've gone fishing with them, it's really uncomfortable for me because like turtles are my favorite animal. Okay, aside from tigers, I love turtles. And I've seen this person fish and accidentally catch a turtle, and I'm like, I just want to like scream, like, oh no, like pulling out the hook. Oh no, it's fine, it's fine. And one day I had to actually hold the poor turtle while this person was trying to unhook and trying to convince me that the turtle wasn't in pain. And I was like, this poor thing is bleeding. It has to be feeling pain.
Yeah, it was definitely in pain. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If
So
it
it's
has a
like,
nervous system, it feels
oh
pain.
yeah,
That's what the nervous system is for.
yeah.
I mean,
People used to think that what is it? Goldfish had like a 3 second or 3 minute memory or something like that.
yeah,
But scientists have discovered that that's like completely not true. There's some fish that have like a very long term memory. They live for like 2 years, and they have a memory of like a specific spot, like a hole in a net for an entire year. They had that memory. So it was like they have long term memory. They can recognize people. They can map. Places and go back to like the same feeding spots, year after years. There's some other fish that use rocks, I think it was, or some kind of hard material to like break up things to feed themselves. I can remember if it was like eggs or something like that. There's
yeah.
fish that pick up a leaf with their mouth to like scoop up their eggs and move them to a safe place. Like, how do they know that that's not a safe place? Like, there has to be some kind of thought process going on there, right?
Well,
So it's like,
you know, there is a lot of debate, or used to be debate, about invertebrates having a capacity for nociception, right? A capacity
mm,
to feel pain, and that seems to be that they do, right? And that's a problem. It's a big problem because we have a lot of fisheries in the world. We have a lot of places that farm these animals to an insane degree, and it seems like we are creating harm factories on a massive scales and have been doing it for centuries at this point, and been saying, hey, like, no, it's fine actually, right? So again, if the conclusion is these animals do have, what is sentience? Some define it as a capacity for feelings, right? A capacity for positive and negative mental states, right? If these animals, which many scientists are increasingly concluding to be the case, that they do have positive and negative states, have these internal feelings, then we are causing harm, and that is worthy of dismantling. In my view, I just think that that's really radical for some people because it changes how we do so many things, right? Not just the food stuff. We're talking clothing. We're talking other industrial materials that you would never even dream of. Did you know that there are alcohol? I'm going back to food here, but some alcohol is made through charred cow bones.
Did
We take
not know
charred
that.
cow
Okay,
bones
I did
in the
not know that.
processing. I mean, all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't even think of that comes up in these processes that tie back to the exploitation of animals. So it is a pretty radical upheaval of the current world order. But again, so was the giving the ability for women to vote. So was the abolition of slavery. All kinds of stuff that, in retrospect, seem like, yeah, that was a good idea. We probably should have done that. Now I think is the time for animal welfare, right? I think now is the time we make those changes, if we want to be on the right side of history. You know,
Yeah, and it's not just there, like you just said, not just about eating animal flesh, even things like the dairy industry or the egg industry. Like there's a lot of people that are vegetarian and they're like, well, what is the harm in eating uh, dairy products?
yeah,
Let me just point out a couple of things, okay? I wrote down a few facts that I found. This is from Boston Children's Hospital, so it's pretty respectable. All right, 68% of the world population is lactose intolerant. Says in East Asians is 70%, and African Americans and Native Americans is 80% are lactose intolerant, and that was Native Americans. Sorry about that. And Asian Americans is over 90%. And in Vietnam, 98% of adults are lactose intolerant. Do you know why that is?
now
Tell
why
me.
would that be?
It's because humans are not lactose intolerant. We are just not fucking baby cows,
We're not
right?
supposed to be drinking it.
Yeah, we didn't. There was no part in our evolutionary process that required us to drink the milk of other animals, right? That's a choice that we made.
It is kind of odd. Like, who was the first person to think, "Hey, let me get this out of the cow's udder and drink it"? Yeah, I mean, I
I
could
mean,
see if you're like really thirsty, maybe.
right, it may have been like necessity at that point. Like, I don't know, they didn't have anything else to drink, and they know that their mothers fed them milk, and then, there's how other mammals feeding their babies milk, and they were like, hey, I'm thirsty, I'm gonna drink that. But aside from survival right there and then, we don't need that today. We don't need that today, for sure. And I mean, the calling it lactose intolerant is a little bit silly because there's like a lot of products and things that people take to help them break down the enzymes and make sure that they can, process the milk just to continue drinking it. And it's like we don't realize the harm that is still causing your body. Like, I don't know, think about it. Like if you go to your primary care doctor, right? Getting into a little bit of the health aspect of this. Not we're not gonna go too deep because I'm not a doctor. So but like if you go to the doctor and you have anything like, I don't know, type 2 diabetes or like any of the modern sort of lifestyle diseases like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart disease, what's the first thing that they're gonna tell you to do? It'll be like, hey, limit your red meat, like don't eat that much fat, like
Yep.
eat less cheese and milk because it's not good for you. And what are they going to recommend? That you go and eat more vegetables, more fruits, more whole grains, legumes, beans, all the kinds of plant-based stuff that we always think of as healthy. So uh,
I do have a question. Do you consider? I know you were going on about the lactose intolerant and the consumption of milk, um, but I guess the harm that you would be against that affects like dairy cows would just be like the more industrialized type dairy cows. Because would it be considered inhumane, like if someone just had a cow on their farm that they used, to milk themselves, but not do like a industrial type setting, or hand milk a cow every few days for milk for the family?
Yeah, I mean, so the average life of a cow in its normal environment is 15 to 20 years. The average life of a cow in a dairy farm today, they'll be lucky if they get to 5. 5 to 6 is the max, right? So a third to a fourth of their life really cut short, just because what people don't maybe understand is that you have to impregnate a cow to get milk.
Okay,
Some
see,
people
yeah,
think that dairy
I didn't know
cows,
that. I didn't know that.
yes,
So
it
okay,
just like how a human
like a
woman
woman.
doesn't
okay,
give
okay.
milk, you have to impregnate. So cows are forcibly, um, I'll avoid using the word, but you know where I'm trying to say, um, you know, given given sperm against their consent, right?
Yeah, there you
Um, through pretty gross means, by the way.
go.
You could see some of the
You have
stuff they
to
used to call them
go
R
in there.
word racks. They now have other terms to use it, but basically placed on a rack, they stick a glove up there and they impregnate these cows, right? And so what happens in that process is, they have to constantly be pregnant for the first 4, 5, 6 years of their life, which really drains on them. And they have to be milked more than once a day, usually at least twice a day.
But
Um,
also, it's like a woman and their baby. Okay, like if the baby's taking the milk, then the baby gets the milk.
right. And so
So
the milk is not going to feed
Correct. Yeah,
calves,
yeah.
right?
No,
It's
see,
not
I
going,
I
yeah.
never knew that perspective of it. That's just
Yeah.
insane. So yeah, that's definitely horrible.
Yeah, so it's not good that if you're buying dairy, you're still supporting non-vegan practices, right? Because they're coming from these farms that do these things. And so if you're going to milk a cow, I would say why? That milk isn't for you. It's
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
baby cow,
No, so
right?
no, I agree
um,
with you now. Yeah, y'all
mhm,
definitely. I learned something from both you guys today on that.
yeah,
and I mean, you can probably go into like the chicken uh, process, right? Like the eggs. It's kind of like
right.
very
So
similar. Yeah, go. You go ahead.
there's two
Combination.
different kinds of processes for chickens. There's broiler chickens, which are the chickens that are raised for their meat consumption. And then there's the other kinds of chickens that are raised for their, the egg laying capacities, and for chicks. So what happens is when eggs are actually laid in hatcheries and they're taken, male chicks are not worthwhile in a capitalist society, right? It's only the female ones because the female ones are laying the eggs. You don't need that many males. You can get a lot of the same hens impregnated by the same sperm from male chickens. So what happens is they are killed. They are put on treadmills and put into machines that crunch them up, and that's because it's considered waste as once these chicks are born. So they check them for the sex, if they know they're male, and they can kind of know this through, there's some temperature stuff that they can do. They put eggs in certain environments to help try to change the gender ratio. There's studies on that, and they continue to develop science to try to
Yeah, it's like the
offset that.
turtles. Yeah.
Right. So male chicks are just killed very shortly after they're born. So you're already doing that part of it, right? And then there's the actual conditions in which the egg laying hens are in themselves, which is also terrible. In Europe, there have been laws that have been passed to sort of prevent these battery cages because they're so terrible. for the chickens. They used to have them just in these big wire frameworks so that they couldn't actually sit on the ground because there's not enough space on the ground. So they get them up with these wire frameworks for them to hang on and then to lay their eggs down into these spaces. So really cruel, terrible places, even for what's called range-free animals and range-free chickens. Only is a very specific criteria where in the first 6 weeks of their life they get to be outside, but the rest of their lives they still get to be inside some of these facilities. So all in all, I mean, and this isn't covering even what happens with, I didn't even get to the broilers, but I won't spend too long in it. The point is, the systems are cruel. The systems are cruel to the chickens that make the eggs. So it's not in a vegan's interest to support egg industries either. It doesn't make sense for me to make the distinction between just meat and these other animal products, because by buying these animal products, I'm still supporting animal exploitation.
Yeah, no, see, I've never really understood the byproduct. Well, yeah, why vegans were against eating, eggs are items with dairy. And so no, that completely makes sense. I mean, the way that you explain that.
Yeah, and also, I mean, for the chickens to be able to lay eggs, they have to be given, what is it? Can't remember. Was it hormones or to sort of stimulate them to produce more eggs, because chickens don't produce that many eggs in their regular average life. Like if you had a backyard chicken, we'll
Yeah, you
probably
wouldn't
give you
get that
like
many.
one egg
So
every now and then.
they are given hormones to increase their capacity. Already, the modern chicken that is the broiler, not broiler chickens, the egg-laying chickens that are kept today are already lay eggs at a way higher rate than what they were found naturally. It used to be like I think it's like a few a month was what
Yeah.
their old species used to be able to, and now it's like a several hundred a month, right? So that also affects their system. They don't get to live as long as a result a lot of times because of the damage that does to their organ structure, right? And having to lay so much. And so we've already messed these animals up. That's true also for how we've raised pigs and cows, by the way, that we've done things to their evolutionary lineage to make them more accessible for their animal product for their products for us to consume. So yeah, we've already done heinous things to their biology. Yeah, for sure.
Do you think
Yeah.
that these type of animals would be able, like, let's say that we were able to, down the line that these type of industrial farms were no longer allowed. So these animals that we have farm for all these years, we start having them back out into natural environments. Would they be able to survive, or would it take them a while to readapt and learn how to readapt to being a wild type animal versus just being raised in a factory environment?
Well, there already are wild bovine and wild chickens, right? They were living in the wild before we were involved. But for the ones that exist, I mean, there are rescue farms that do take animals that were raised on factory farm locations and get to live on, more taken care of life. And yeah, those animals almost always live longer because they're taken care of. When they have health defects, they're actually taken care of rather than cold, right? So as far as like what could wild populations survive in some circumstances? Yeah. But even if that wasn't the case, let's say that we've messed up these animals so much that none of them, and this isn't true, but let's say the case is right, there's some situation where none of these animals could survive in the wild. That still doesn't actually justify their suffering. They're still beings with a
Oh
capacity to
yeah,
suffer,
I
right?
agree with that.
So yeah, so that this is an argument that I've heard from people that say, well, these animals are already so messed up, it doesn't matter. We might as well just keep doing it. No, they still have, they're still beings capable
Yeah.
of suffering, right? But beyond that, yes, there have been rehabilitation efforts for lots of modern farming animals, and that have lived closer to their normal lifespan. Yeah.
But there's also the fact that naturally they wouldn't have these high numbers. Like we breed them purposely in these high numbers only for meat, for eating. So
Right. Yeah, we do artificially inflate the species birth rates
yeah,
because of our farming. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So we've covered the harms to animals, okay? But meat, animal products also cause a lot of harm to humans. And again, I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice, okay? I'm gonna warn you. I just wanted to share like a little bit of my personal story so people can see that there's two sides to the benefits of a vegan diet. Okay, so I've had a lot of health issues like my whole life. Um, like I said earlier, you go to the doctor, they're like, hey, eat less of this and more of that, and blah blah blah. So I tried all the dietary changes, but I was still eating meat, and none of my conditions were responding to those changes. But in 2021, I was like so fed up. I have type 1 diabetes, and I was like so fed up with the constant ups and crash down of my blood sugar. So I was like, I saw this type 1 diabetes doctor that had a plan, and he was like, my blood sugar levels, obviously he still uses insulin because it's a type 1, you don't make insulin, but he was like, my levels are a lot more stable, a lot more manageable. There's like no insulin resistance to where I inject insulin and it does what it is supposed to do, rather than just like spike from eating a pizza and then crashing from the injecting of so much insulin. So I was like, all right, I'm just gonna try it. Okay, so within like I would say like 3 days or so of completely removing all animal products, my blood sugars I were dropping so much that I had to actually lower my insulin intake. I was like, all right, well, that's good. Um, there were like a lot less of these huge spikes. Um, a lot more of like flat lines, not dead, just flat lines on my glucose meter. But anyways, so I also had like high cholesterol. I had like kidney issues. I had something called IGF-1, which is like it's a hormone that usually increases cell growth. It's mostly for like muscles, but if you are at higher risk for certain cancers, then having a higher IGF-1 level means that your tumors or like your cancer cells are going to grow at a much faster rate. So I had two different levels. I had prolactin and the IGF-1, which when combined, both of them, they can often indicate like some type of brain tumor. And I was freaking out. So I was like, what the heck do I do? And within a month of starting the diet, I went back to my doctor because I was like so worried about all my levels, and I asked her to repeat all of my testing. And we didn't think that there would be any type of change, but pretty much all of those numbers, my kidney levels improved a lot. They weren't perfect because it's a genetic condition, so it wasn't going to like be completely healed. But my blood sugar, my A1C, like the average blood sugar, went way lower. The IGF-1 went below normal, like below the cutoff level. The prolactin went down. Like pretty much all of my levels that I was worried about were getting better. Um, Within a year, I used to get kidney stones like I don't know every 3 months or so. After a year, I didn't have any more kidney stones. I've had like one a year now, more so or less. Okay, even though I eat like tons of spinach and things that people would connect to having kidney stones for. But the most shocking thing for me was I have a pain condition called CRPS. They call it suicide disease because people often take their life because it's so painful. I have like 30 nerve blocks. I was on muscle relaxers, opiates, ketamine. Uh, I had a nerve stimulator implanted, and I had it for about 5 years. I had this condition for, let me think, 2016. Well, yeah, like over 10 years of having all of these pain procedures. Like I was using a cane, I was using crutches. At some point, it kind of spread to my other leg, so I had to use a wheelchair. And within a month, my pain level went from a constant 6, 7, between 6 and 8, to like a 5. And I was like, that's gotta be like some kind of coincidence. That's not possible. And I was all right. Then the months went on, and the pain became less and less. I didn't need the cane anymore. I was able to stop the first thing that I stopped was the muscle relaxer, then the ketamine, then we removed the nerve stimulator, and the last one was the opiates. And today, I don't use any of these assistive devices, no pain medications, nothing. And you can imagine after like 10 years of having all of these pain procedures, all of these pain medications, surgeries, like how could I would have never thought that a fully plant-based diet will be the one thing that will calm down the pain for me. I was like absolutely mind blown by that.
It was amazing to see the difference in her from when she changed her diet. It was like night and
And
day.
how long ago was that now, AJ?
Well, it's kind of been a process. So it started in, like I said, in 2021 was when I first started because of the diabetes, because I wanted to like improve my blood sugar levels. And so I wasn't even thinking about the pain. It wasn't something I was doing to help me with the pain. It was like something completely unexpected. So I would say 20. When did I have the stimulator removed? Was like 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So over these 4 or 5 years, I was sort of slowly dropping one thing at a time because I was so scared of the pain coming back. I was like, it can't be because of the diet. Like, there's got to be something else. But I dropped one thing, the other, and it was like I continued. Like the last one was the opiates, which was the hardest one to get off of because of the withdrawals. That's a whole nother story for another day. Like I would say, like I almost died trying to do that. But coming off that was like a huge milestone for me. Unfortunately, I've had other surgeries. Like when I had my eye surgeries, it was like hard to like cook and stay motivated. So you kind of like eating a lot more stuff that I wasn't careful about whether it had animal products or not. So I do feel like when I eat more animal products, I can immediately tell the pain, like the inflammation increases, like my knees start hurting, my foot, I'll start limping a little bit. So I'm currently trying my best to stay, I'll say like 90% plant-based.
Yeah. Important for me to point out at this point that I, of course, first of all, AJ is my friend. I will accept their story as truth and value. But even then, I would never accept the positive benefits that come from a plant-based or vegan diet just from anecdote. And I don't think anybody at home should either. I think you can trust in the other research that has been done, and from what I have seen, of inflammation being reduced from plant-based diets. As you mentioned, doctors do and have regularly recommended plant-based diets for high blood pressure and for better regulation of blood sugar levels. So that's not even me or you that says that, right? Those are the people who are way smarter than me, who've studied this for way longer, that also concur with that for sure.
Yeah, that's why I will share this story, and I always warn people. I am not a doctor. Like before I started this, I looked into it from other doctors because I wanted to hear from people that have done the research, which I did not do before, right? So there was a lot of people that I could trust. I don't know, this Dr. Godless, she's here in Houston. She's reversing her lupus with the diet. There's I don't know, there's like so many of these plant-based doctors online that you can find the researches. Colin Campbell.
I know we're getting close to the end of our time here as well.
We are.
But one thing I'll say is anyone who's been listening and who's been really considering this, I would encourage anybody who wants to write a comment on this video and say, hey, what try to convince me to go back to eating animal products. Seriously, try to make that case, because I would love to do that. You know how much easier my life would be? Oh my goodness. I don't have to, be as picky going to restaurants. I don't have to, I can kind of cook or eat more stuff. Like that'd be great. Anybody who wants to try to convince me of that, please be free to. But if anything has moved you at all, then maybe there's a case to be made for the positions that we've outlined today. I think that there is, but that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Discussion, right?
Right. So the last thing that I am gonna ask is this. Okay, you mentioned earlier something funny about your size when Joe was talking about masculinity. All right, and I wanted to show people a picture of you and I standing next to each other. Okay, so people can tell our size difference. Dan is like six. How tall are you, Dan? Like
I'm
six.
a 6'5". Yep.
All right.
And I had my weight was I'm still my weight is better than it was in that picture. I'll say that. I've fluctuated over the years. I've been better sometimes than others, but
Uh,
it
We
is
all
what it is.
fluctuate.
Yes,
yeah,
there
there you go.
there are overweight vegans. Yes, they exist. Okay, they ain't
No,
all
no, that
skinny. So
that wasn't where I was going. Okay, but
Mhm.
I wanted to help our listeners solve the mystery of the year. Okay, the question that every meat eater asks every vegan every time, and I think for a guy your size, some of our viewers might be worried about where the fuck do you get your protein? Then how have you not withered and died by now
Well,
as a
I'll have you know
vegan?
that, first of all, I probably know more about my macros than the people who actually ask those questions, which is hilarious. The other thing I'll say is there are definitely vegan bodybuilders if you're into that. In fact, my fiance has participated in bodybuilding competitions, and while she is not fully vegan herself, she is committed to doing at least one vegan prepped meal every day.
Uh,
And I have to keep up and do my thing for my own self. So you get it by all sorts of places. There's so many sources. It's not even. I mean, it's trivial for me to even list them all. But there are plenty of plant-based sources that you can get. Um, you know, your protein and your macros on. That's totally fine. Absolutely can be done.
let's do it. I mean, if somebody your size can do it, anyone can do it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's a vegan bodybuilder. I forget his name, but he has this this sort of pithy saying, which is think about the ox and think about how big an ox is and how strong an ox is and what do oxes eat,
True.
right?
Right. They
Which is a
vegetables.
interesting point, right? So yeah, I mean, we can definitely you can definitely hit your gains and be vegan. It's been done plenty of times. That's not a reason to hold yourself back. So
I agree. I agree. So, I mean, I think that choosing a vegan lifestyle shouldn't be about, being completely perfect. It's like just align your actions with the values that you already hold. Like, be compassionate, use your logic, be responsible, right? Like, acknowledge that kind of like the way that most of us have deconstructed our God belief, then we can also deconstruct this carnism belief that, like,
sure.
as
I
you
mean,
called it
like,
earlier.
look, we don't have these kinds of conversations about humanism, right? I mean, we say, yeah, we should
Mhm.
be and we should do these things, and we leave it at that. We say we should do these things. I just think, yeah, we should do these things also. So whether you want to call that vegan or not, you know, that's up to you if you want to put a label on it. But I just think that these are things we should be doing. And that's that's where I'm at. So
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this was a great conversation, and everybody should be having more of these conversations about veganism and morality and what our real values are. Like, why do we think that we are sort of more superior or more important than other sentient animals? So, yeah. But anyways, so we have reached the end of the show. Okay, I'm just gonna remind people real quick that on Saturday, we are gonna have Pumpkin Pie State. Yeah, that's gonna be fun too. So I think it's at 11 in the morning
Yeah,
Central
early
Time.
early
It's
Saturday
gonna
show.
be like our first Saturday morning show. Um, I think that one thing that we can do as vegans or hopeful vegans um, is to not be super harsh on people. A lot of people try to, like we said, show very graphic things to people and shock them and into like stopping eating animals, like, and rather take them to the side of, we are similar to animals. Why are we not giving them the same moral consideration that we give to any other living animal, to dogs, to cats, to the ones that we keep at home? So those are my closing thoughts. Anybody else have any more?
I mean, vegan tactics, that's a whole other can of worms. So you didn't ask me my opinion about that. That'll have to be for the next time you have me on. So
Sure. We can do a whole other show about this again. Like, I mean, there's like so many other things we can cover, like medical research and yeah, all kinds of other vegan topics. So yeah,
No, it's
we'll
been fun.
hopefully.
It's been fun. Like I enjoyed listening to y'all and learning some in-depth stuff about veganism that I'm not too familiar with. So yeah, definitely. Yeah. I didn't get out my topic that I was gonna say would throw a loop. So I guess I'll be for our next show. I was gonna.
Oh man,
I
now
just
I want to know.
I want to briefly say it, and I'll leave everybody thinking about that.
All right, do it. Do that.
So both of you have been talking this evening, well, during the show, about how a lot of people will follow veganism based on the morals behind it, seeing empathy to animals. But what about if you're looking at it in that aspect where you're putting humans and animals at the same level? I was just, in my mind, I started thinking, so animals can be empathetic towards each other, but do they have morals? So like a lion would eat a human if it's in its environment without even thinking about it. There's other animals that eat other animals that aren't they're carnivores. I was just thinking about that. I'd like to really like dive into that and talk about that topic a little bit more next time.
Yeah, I definitely have thoughts on that, but yeah, we'll leave it for next time. That's a
I
good
do
question.
as well,
That's a
but I
good
think we're
question.
out of time.
Yeah, we're out of time. So now Dan, you have to come back.
Yeah. We'll make it come back. I'll force you. Yeah, we got some blackmail or something. Uh, anyways, thank you so much, Dan, for being here today, and I'll see you around the YouTube sphere.
That's right.
Somewhere.
So
Thanks
Dan's
for
it
having me,
tomorrow.
guys.
We'll be tuning in.
Oh
Wait,
yes.
yeah, tomorrow's
Sweet.
Thursday. Yeah.
Tomorrow's
Alright.
Thursday. Watch Sedanza live Thursdays at 9. Gotta get my plug
Exactly.
in.
Yeah, awesome.
So Dan's, there we go. All right. So we'll see everybody next time. And thank you.
Yeah, have a good one.
Bye bye.